Good evening, everyone. It is once again Ted the Speed Learner, and tonight I am going to review the movie entitled The Breakfast Club. That's right, folks. I'm going to review the movie entitled The Breakfast Club, and this movie is like a Christmas present. On the outside, it is well decorated. Think about it. You've got John Hughes directing. You've got stars like Molly Ringwald. Okay, you've got Molly Ringwald, Ali Sheedy, Anthony Michael Hall. You've got Emilio Estevez and Judd Nelson, which unfortunately for me, sometimes I get the name Judd Nelson confused with the name Judd Hirsch. If you do not know who Judd Hirsch is, watch the TV series Taxi, watch Independence Day, because he was in that too. So sometimes I may get that a little confused. I am sorry about that. But anyway, great acting, and then on top of that you have the nostalgic effect. I mean, this is a high school, and a lot of people have nostalgia for high school. I have a little, but not very much. But there are others that have a lot more nostalgia for high school than I do, and I can truly understand why they would want to watch this movie. Really, I do. And there are some comedic parts to this movie. There's a dancing scene. There's Judd Nelson's character crawling through a duct. Okay, and I can understand that. However, once you open the Christmas present, that's when things get a little different. So we're going to review this academically rather than what everybody else would do in the line of a review. As soon as you see the academic side of it, you're going to see that things are a little different than what you probably may have remembered if you watched this years ago. Okay? So, first things first, I am going to ask the following questions about this movie. And I want you to start from the beginning of the movie and compare what I'm asking to what's actually in the movie, and maybe you guys will come up with some answers. If not, maybe you'll know somebody who can. Okay. Now, I do recall, because I graduated in the late 1980s, okay, schools were financially strapped, and that has not changed that much over the years. Okay? They were all financially strapped. And I don't know how it was. I went to a rural school. To show you how rural it was, we went from kindergarten all the way to the senior year in the same building. That's pretty rural. But anyway, when you're talking about a rural school versus an urban school, things might have been a little different in an urban school. In our rural school, we never had a Saturday detention. Not all day, not even for an hour. They just couldn't afford it. Think about it. You had to have the air conditioning, you had to have the water, whole 9 yards. It just was not feasible to have, and not to mention the teacher's pay on top of that. To have a Saturday detention, that was just not applicable. Now, I don't know what it was like in an urban school, but it just didn't happen in a rural school. Period. They just didn't have the money. So, alright. Now, in the introduction, you see some lyrics, and I believe they're from David Bowie. And the question I have about that is, what were the kids doing to change the world? What were these kids, if you think about the whole movie, what did they ever do that actually changed the whole wide world? Okay? And how were these kids immune to your consultations? And why wasn't Claire attending a private school? I mean, her father obviously was rich enough to do that. Why wasn't she attending a private school at this point? I mean, why she was even there, I'll never know. Maybe she got kicked out of a private school. Who knows? Okay? Now, how was, and I believe his name was Brian, how was Brian supposed to study in a detention when he was given specific instructions by the principal to not study during the detention? Did the parent not even think about this? Really? Oh, and the principal didn't physically escort all of these kids into the library. And why the library? He could have put these kids in a classroom. He didn't have to put them in the library. And why was the principal's office across the hall from the library? That didn't make much sense. I mean, where I went to school, the library was way far away from the principal. And the principal's office was always at the right. I mean, you walked in the front door, there it was. I think that's where a principal's office should be, to see if who's coming in the front door. That's a better place to have a principal's office. Okay. The principal has Andy taking the magazine rack and trying to put it in front of the door to keep the door open. Why? He should have known right off the bat that that was not going to work. The magazine rack wasn't heavy enough. Okay? Why didn't he pile just a bunch of heavy books? What, this library didn't have dictionaries or encyclopedias or anything? Really? I don't think so. And how did John Bender successfully manage to get cigarettes, and there were other things too, that he actually got into the library, into the school itself? For heaven's sakes. Really? What? The principal didn't inspect him further, or him take his coat off, whatever? Why didn't the principal, at some point, he should have known that John had those cigarettes. Why didn't he confiscate them immediately? And that wasn't the only thing he should have confiscated, I can tell you that. And why did Allison have so much dandruff? Really? Now, John gets a hold of a book and starts ripping it apart. What was the title of the book? Who was the author? And what was the book actually about? And why would Claire want to live with her brother? And that brings up some better questions. How much older was this brother of hers? What was the occupation of the brother? Nobody ever asked that. Where was he living? And would that brother actually allow Claire to live with him? Oh. And there was something else that John had brought into the library that the principal should have also confiscated. And if you've watched the movie enough, you know what that other item was. Oh, and apparently Carl, I was like, why didn't he turn Bender in? There was something that he was supposed to turn him in for, and I'm trying to figure out what the heck it is. Oh, yes. Why didn't Carl turn John in for bringing marijuana into the classroom? Now, that brings up another point right there, because these kids are not only successfully able to sneak out of the library, but they were also successfully able to get to John's locker, and then at that point they were trying to get back to the library before the principal actually got back to the library. Now you're thinking to yourself, they should know the proper route to finally get back to the library without getting the principal's attention. What, they couldn't do that? Really? I think one had a good idea, the other one didn't, but they followed the one that didn't have a good idea. What was that all about? Why was the clock 20 minutes fast, and why didn't Carl actually fix that? That's the janitor's job. Fix it. And Allison admits that she acquires vodka on a regular basis. How is that even possible? I mean, she doesn't even look rich enough to have access to vodka in the first place. But even if she was capable, where's she getting this stuff from? I mean, what, her parents just don't care that she's getting a liquor cabinet or something? And why didn't Andy ask Allison where she was getting that vodka? But he wasn't the slightest bit interested? Really? Now, everybody brought their lunch, including Claire bringing sushi. Now, you know that this kind of stuff has to be refrigerated. I'm assuming that when they first brought it into the building, that the principal took them to the faculty lounge and put the stuff in the refrigerator so it wouldn't spoil. Because if it was just sitting in the library for half the day, it was spoiled. They couldn't eat it. But anyway. What was in Allison's straws? I'd like to know that. I mean, it looked like sugar, but who knows? Okay, and as you know, Allison took the lunch meat out of her sandwich and just threw it up in the air, and then she put something into the bread. What did she put in her sandwich? I'd like to know that as well. Oh, are you kidding me? We're talking a high school principal and he didn't properly secure the lid on his thermos? Really? I mean, the guy wasn't all that brilliant, but I think he could have come up with that. And like I said, none of these kids knew the layout of the high school to know how to avoid the principal as they were trying to get the marijuana. Oh, and I like this. The principal actually threatened John. What principal in their right mind would actually threaten one of their students like that? Don't they know that they could go to jail for stuff like that? Really? Oh. And John falls out of the ceiling. Really? And he comes out of there without a scratch? I don't think so. And the glass in the door was so weak that when Andy shouts, it just breaks into a million pieces. Really? First of all, how did Brian get a hold of a fake ID? And secondly, why would he be using it to vote? Really? Okay. Oh, and the principal doesn't notice the smell of marijuana. Really? And has anyone ever really wondered what was in Alice's purse? She finally pours it out, but they didn't even ask her what was in her purse. I would have been a little curious. I mean, everybody else was checking everybody else's stuff. Well, why wouldn't they check Allison's stuff too? Oh, and, okay. They finally get to the part where they're discussing why they landed into the detention in the first place. They talk about why Andy was in this detention. What I'd like to know is, when Andy told everybody what he had done to actually get into this detention, well, when it comes to the kid, why didn't they have him sit down in some hot water or something to soften the tape before they actually removed it? They caused that kid unnecessary injury. Any hospital would be brilliant enough to do that. And what brand of tape did Andy use? That's never discussed. And how did Brian actually acquire the contraption that actually discharged in his locker? How did he acquire that? I'd like to know. And the principal actually let Allison into the detention when technically he had no reason to do so, because technically she said that she absolutely did nothing to warrant her being in the detention in the first place. If she did nothing wrong, why was she even in there? That doesn't make any sense. Now, I did notice something. She was a kleptomaniac and a compulsive liar, but apparently she didn't do anything serious enough to warrant being in this detention. Are you kidding me? There are actual music albums in this library, and they're not like classical music or anything like that. It's just real modern day stuff, and we didn't even have that in our library. I mean, 99% of the stuff we had in there was books, and they were a few record albums, but they were all classical stuff. There was nothing in there modern day at all. So John has the experience of going through the ducts, and of course he doesn't make it all the way through the ducts, but then he chooses to go through them a second time? Really? If you've blundered that bad the first time, I would suggest not going through that a second time. So what is my review of this movie? Well, like I said, on the outside it looks like a great movie. But if you really think about it on the inside, this could be pretty traumatizing to anybody that actually watches this. I mean, just the mere thought of why these people were in, I felt sorry for them. I really did. But on the other hand, every one of them deserved to be in detention. Actually, they needed to have some psychological counseling too. Why wasn't that ever offered? I would have loved to have seen that. But this is something that can emotionally disturb anybody that's not equipped and capable of handling the material that has been presented to them in this movie. So, if I were a parent, and I'm not, but if I were, I would sit the kids down and explain this movie thoroughly to them before I would actually have them watch it. What they saw was just, I'm like, okay, yeah, no. So, like I said, from a regular point of view, this is pretty entertaining, but if you're looking from an academic point of view, this is very psychologically disturbing. And it's like, okay. And John Hughes was legendary at this, okay? And let me tell you something. He was very legendary at this. If you know anything about Home Alone or even 16 Candles, he did tend to present some material that was pretty disturbing in each one of those films. And that wasn't the only films he did. He did some other ones too. And you can see how disturbing some of these films actually are. So, I have to give this film a C-. Because, like I said, it was on the outside okay, but on the inside, it really wasn't the movie everybody thought it was. And if you look at it a little more sharply and a little more academically, you see my point. Alright. Well, I wanted to thank you guys very, very much for watching this presentation. And I wanted to also let you guys know that on this particular one, on this particular video, you have probably already seen the card that's up here. That'll take you to my next movie review, and you can watch that. Or you can take a look at those end screens. Alright. I want to thank you very much for watching this particular presentation. I will tell you more in a future presentation, so I'd like for you to stay tuned.